Hey, friends, it's that time again. We are here for another session in the AI Next video series. We are doing interviews with different practitioners and specialists to really unpack what we can do with AI for good and for the furthering of your ministry and the gospel. Today, I'm sitting next to Corey Alderin, a good friend, a practitioner, a ministry innovator, and also founder of an AI tool called Sermon Shots. Welcome, Corey. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Kenny.
So, Corey, let's get right into the story and introduce you to the people. I know you as a serial entrepreneur doing some serious damage for the gospel in many different ways. And as we've gotten to know each other over the last couple of years, it's just been amazing to see how you've been applying different approaches, methodologies, and your thinking hat on how do we utilize these digital tools that we have today. Back 10 years now, even before we have AI that's readily available, you've been doing a lot of things on the digital front. You even have a collection of sites that have influenced literally millions, I think millions of people. Can you just share with us your story, your personal faith journey of how you actually eased into this and that trajectory of growth as you landed now into Sermon Shots?
Yeah, I got my start many years ago, 15, 20 years ago, starting the collection of sites that you're referring to. That operates under our business name Telling Ministries. And I got my start by early on in Facebook when before there were a lot of Facebook pages.
Yeah.
I built a page that just blew up one day. I was creating a daily quote every day, putting it on an image. Now it seems like a very common thing, but early on that was not a common thing, and that quickly grew to over 5 million people following that, and that became uh, really what kickstarted my career in ministry. And I I remember early on when we had that many people early on in Facebook pages, that 5 million people mattered. Like today, it's still great. I don't want to like make it sound like it's some small thing, but you post something today and it gets 5 million people gets
Oh,
10,000,
absolutely.
100,000
And,
people, right? A small
and
percent. But
we're not just talking just impact here. Like it has globally impacted, right? I think you're literally in hundreds of countries, over 200 countries, right? Have drawn visitors from, right?
So yeah, the collection of all those sites, that site and all five of our sites that are like daily devotional sites, daily devotional answering questions have reached well over 10 million people over the years, maybe even 20 million or more. And some of the coolest things that happen from those sites is uh, one of the most common things that's searched online that we get people to come to our sites for is seeing Jesus in a dream. So
Oh,
very
really?
common for Muslims to not really know who Jesus is, not having full access, right? But typing in who is this person, some general thing, and our pastor on staff has had so many conversations with Muslims and really good, impactful uh, like conversations with Muslims that have just been amazing. So those are
And
some of the
and,
big
and
things
actually
that happen.
serious, right? Like part of I know one of your sites at least has literally the gospel presentation and has the ability for someone to accept Christ right there and then. And that's why you also have a pastor on staff with you at this point. Can you share with us from that perspective, like what have you learned from the power of the internet, which basically is reaching way more people than the potential local church is able to do in any zip code. What encouraging thing can you tell to a pastor or a church leader that's watching right now in terms of what is the opportunity that do we still have with the internet in reaching people that are really lost and looking for a savior like Jesus? What's that insight that you've learned over the years and experience like this?
Well, I think just to say what reiterate a little bit what I was saying is we posted that an article right? We posted an article, and all of a sudden it's reached by anybody in the world, people that don't have access to the Bible even. And so, like the who am I writing an article,
Yeah.
right? But a pastor, like a pastor speaking a sermon or writing this content, like even you have the ability to be even way more impactful than I do in that situation. That your specific thing that you're talking about on Sunday could have an impact across the world.
Yeah.
And then not even the individual person, right? But the church as a whole. Like that's I'm one person that impacted that many people, another pastor, or how about the 300,000 churches in our country? How impactful each one of those sermons could be across the world.
Yeah.
It's limitless.
I love it. So, one of the things I wanted to bring you on today is to talk about AI, and the context is that you have developed a venture called Sermon Shots that it's not AI like front and center. AI is in the background. It's doing the work. It's not like ChatGPT where you're literally trying to say, I'm interacting with AI. What led you to that? What's the problem you're trying to solve with Sermon Shots right now for the pastor and for the church leader?
Yeah, I think it's funny. It kind of actually just continues on what I was just saying, which is your sermon really is a valuable piece of content. There's so much you can do with it, and there, historically, there's been a limitation on like time and resources you have in your church, and so really, I think Sermon Shots has been always in the mindset of how can we help the church utilize that thing in way more than they're doing right now. So Sunday's great, but there's so much more you can do. So Sermon Shots started off with what I think is one of the more impactful things, which is utilizing it to make little clips, right? So for social media, for reels and all those situations. But there's so much more. And so
Yeah.
utilizing it to create not just more social media content, but your discipleship content in your church, like discussion guides and 5-day devotionals and that sort of thing. So the sermon really can be way more impactful than we're utilizing it right now.
Yeah. Now, I like talking about sermon shots and tools like yours with people that I meet, right? So recently, I've been crisscrossing the country. I think this year I'm speaking to 20 different groups, conferences, events, etc. And the common objection is that pastors should not be using AI for their sermons, right? And Sermon Shots is an easy tool to say, hey, this is something we can all agree upon. It's a great use of AI, whether you agree or disagree on the origin of the sermon, because you're doing it post after the sermon's produced. What do you do with this? Being able to repurpose it, transform it to different forms of content, etc. Can we look at the other side? So if we jump over the fence in the little bit of the dangerous area of debate with people, how do you see AI transforming the way that pastors and church leaders prepare sermons? Not in the next year or two, because I think right now the limitations of our tools really is like ChatGPT or these chatbots. So it's like, oh, input a question, come back, etc. You're seeing the actual innovation in AI ahead of what's available on the, say, retail level, on the public level. How do you see AI transforming really the way pastors are really, forming teaching materials and sermons and actually using that for discipleship?
Yeah, so I would say that things that I'm seeing and hearing that are being worked on,
Yeah.
some really big initiatives, I think, are how can the church create this sort of AI that is your trusted resource, right? Backed by your thinking, your denominational thinking, your like the way that the way that we would as Christians want an AI to be that maybe the
Right.
world isn't thinking about it, right? And so I know that there are places out there that are working on incorporating all the Christian-based content that's out there, the trusted sources, allowing you to say like, I trust this person, this person, this person, and this person. Incorporate that into when I start asking you questions I can trust that it's being pulled from like people that I would trust, names that I know, authors I know, that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
uh, I feel like the AI can get to a place where you can trust the content more
Mhm.
because you understand what's actually driving that content. Whereas right now, like ChatGPT and Claude, right? Like I don't exactly know what's the base of that content.
Right.
But if us as Christians are creating something that is to be used in this scenario, I think we'll have something that will be much more trusted for pastors.
Yeah. I mean, I like to say right now, in this day and age, this chapter of AI development and innovation, we're living in a place where if you're using ChatGPT or these chatbots, these general models for sermon prep, that you are basically getting the approximate gospel, but not an exact and explicit gospel. And that this is why you need a human in the loop, and this is why you can't just give over the reins or the wheel to AI completely. It is a good support mechanism, but at the end of the day, chatbots give you an approximate gospel, but not a actual explicit gospel. Now,
Yep.
one of the things that I'm sure you are bumping into all the time is misconceptions about what AI is,
Mhm.
and how pastor may or may not use it in ministry. What's one misconception, misinformation do you bump into? Do you have any pattern recognition of what's going on where people are looking at AI and thinking about it probably not in the best way or not the proper way?
Uh, well, I think the way that I've heard a lot of people talk about that don't want to use it
Mm.
uh, is that it's some sort of like that they think that you have to take exactly what it is that they give you. So you're talking to ChatGPT, right? In the scenario that you're saying, it's the approximate Bible.
Yeah.
I think as long as we understand that, it can give us ideas. But I think that some people feel like if we're using this, that we're not using our own brain or we're not using the Holy Spirit to help us as well, right? Like all of that can still happen along the same line. So chatting to ChatGPT or Claude in the same way that you would asking somebody for help on writing your sermon. I don't know, coming up with some idea, right? You're not going to just take it and be like, "Yep, okay, putting it right in." You're going to filter it through your mindset, through your thinking. Go have it give you ideas to go do more research and apply. It gives you full space to still listen to God, right? Like I think that that is sort of the way that I've going from hearing people that don't understand how it can be actually a tool to showing them like it's a tool just like using any other tool, right? Like you
Yeah.
can use it for bad, but as long as you have that mindset of you being able to adjust it and fix it, I think that's the
Now,
way I
what
try to.
what in terms of like the evolution of tools, there's the question I always get is like, should we be looking at tools that are specifically made for the church, or should we be using the tools that are out there from big tech? And one of the arguments I've heard is the large tech companies have millions and millions and millions of dollars. They have hundreds, if not thousands, of coders and developers and AI experts developing those things. So, at one sense, those tools are going to be much more refined, sophisticated. But in the other sense, they don't understand the ministry context, right? They have not been informed by Christians, Christian worldviews, even the jargon and the industry language of what we need in our church world. Where do you stand on that? Like, do you see a future where it's not going to be um, is it going to be universal? Like, is it going to be the tools that just encompass everything, or is this going to be a separation where there's specialization specific to the churches? So even like on the chatbot side, do you think the clear majority of people are in the church are going to be using Christian informed, Christian, I don't know, seal of approval tested large language models, or do you think it's going to be the other way around?
And that's a that's a hard one to answer.
Yeah,
Predicting what's going to happen in the
yeah,
future related to AI, that's a tough one. I will say I think I think it should be a combination of both. My guess is we will, like we were talking about with the Christian specific AI
Yeah.
models. My guess is those are going to start to come out, and those are going to be extremely valuable for Christians, for churches to utilize those in a lot of scenarios. My guess is that the Chat GPTs and Claudes are always going to be a step ahead
Yeah.
of a lot of those things, and so there will be a combination of utilize ChatGPT Claude for its like the scenarios where it's really good. And if the Christian based ones are, maybe a step behind is just like think back 6 months ago, potentially, right? Like the 6 months ago version of Claude and ChatGPT were really good. And if it could be that with our like lens of the Christian worldview, I think that is still amazing for 80% of what we're doing. There just might still be this kind of figure out what is the best combination of uh, the different tools, I guess.
Now, on your side, because you're constantly doing new product development, there's more foundational AI resources available for you to use as building blocks to build feature sets and product development, etc. What are you frustrated with? What is in your dreams to be able to produce to support pastors and church leaders that you just don't have the access to, or we don't have that available yet because AI as a category, generative AI as a category, has not evolved yet. What are you itching to actually get to in a future state that you see will really impact ministry work and the gospel for churches everywhere?
Mm. Uh, wow. At the risk of sounding repetitive, I hope I don't, but I do think that if we can get a trusted source, being able to utilize AI, getting people behind the use of AI more, I just feel like the church is going to be in a much better place because if it's trusted by everybody and it's utilized 2x, 5x more than it is now, I just think that that's going to free up people in the church to do more of the really impactful stuff. They can trust that their tedious work is getting done correctly, or their redundant work is getting done correctly, or maybe even a step above redundancy. If they can trust that, I just feel like there's going to be so much more for the church to do locally and worldwide. Uh, but I think a big thing is just being able to get to the place where the church trusts it for more situations, I
Yeah.
think.
Now, internally, I think most churches right now are working through the question of how do we get our staff upskilled? How do we expose them to AI? How do we make them comfortable so that they start to understand what the real, so they can appreciate what AI can and cannot do in everyone's own ministry context, whatever seat they're at the table for, right? Whichever ministry front they're in. Do you have any like practical suggestions on if a church leader is thinking like, oh, I have to get my team up and running and conversant in AI. What do you think is the pathway? Is it to form an AI committee? Is it to do formal training? Is it to, delegate it out? We saw, I think, a parallel potential analog situation with web and social media, right? Social media was compartmentalized at one point, and you had specific people doing social. Now you're seeing every single department is thinking about social media. Every single department is thinking about email marketing, right? It's no longer compartmentalized. What's your thoughts on that right now as we speak here in this year? What's the basic approach for the average church? The average church, is not a mega church. The normal sized church doesn't have IT staff, doesn't have a big media team. Practically speaking, how do we equip pastors to go through that process?
Yeah, I don't know if all situations require some big formal training. I think some training, absolutely. I think we've gotten past the space. I think where people know like a little bit about what AI can do, right? Not maybe not in the church, but everybody has
Yeah.
heard enough to kind of understand, right? If not, I would say the very basic thing is just start chatting with ChatGPT and asking it to solve some of your problems and just be super amazed. I think that's the first thing is like be amazed at what it can actually do. So then it starts getting you thinking, oh, I could use it for this and this. But I think once we get people to at least realize that first aha, like, I can't believe it does this sort of thing, it's then how can we equip them with some more ideas of like here's 10 ways that churches are utilizing it right now. Let's I mean do this in your church and just see what kind of impact it can have. And I think those two things together of the amazement of what it
Yeah.
can do and applying it in the church is going to start to get people to realize there's so much more that can be done. So I think there's a combination of just getting people aware, but then at some point building in the training of how you can do that inside your church. The power of just like amazement, just I think that's what really drives that sort of
Yeah.
stuff from
I
happening.
love it. I love it. Now, because we are in this innovation front, there's so many ways that tools are used by the users that the original creators typically don't think about at the very beginning, right? So a lot of times we release new innovations to the public, and then the public start using it in ways that you never thought about, and that opens up a lot of opportunities for either creating different versions of the tools, different feature sets, etc. Are there any interesting ways that have surprised you, or that you found where people are using sermon shots? Sermon shots, is a tool that's very easy to use, and so I think that one of the things that happens is it allows you to be inspired by using the outputs in different ways. Do you have any examples of things that you found that you didn't intend initially coming out of the gate, and now you're seeing users being able to benefit from it that way?
Yeah, on sermon shots, I would say that probably the most recent one that I was surprised about of just the different ways was we released the 5 day devotional. So building a 5 day devotional off of your sermon. And I we kept hearing from people about how much they loved that feature, and then we were asking them where they were using it, and they were using it in all these different places. They were social media. They posted every day on social media with like an image. They'd send a text message every day to people and get people to sign up for it every day. Same with email. So like sending it every day to email and text message to keep people engaged. And then seeing people then create a page on their website for that 5 day devotional. Like these churches were using it in all these different places that I didn't first anticipate. And as uh, we were hearing how they were using it all like that when they started putting it on websites and on the pages for people to sign up. It's actually what kind of drove us to add more and more features onto sermon shots of how can we give more and more of the churches that are using it this way the ability to put it on their website and through text messaging and all that. So yeah.
And then, is it the, do you have a sense of, I mean, you have tons of users on the system right now. Do you have a sense of who is actually doing the work? Is it the pastor themselves? Is it a communications director? Is it a secretary, assistant? Is it a discipleship pastor? Who's actually using it to take the core sermon content and then repurpose it into other forms?
It varies a lot. We hear from it, and I think the variation probably depends a little bit on the church size and the church structure a little bit, but it ranges from a pastor who's got wearing all the hats, doing everything. Pastor is doing it. We've got communications people doing it. At a bigger church, some church communication person, social media people using it for different. But I've heard interns using it, the secretary using it. Basically, anybody that you hear in churches, like you've got the young person who gets the social media and right, like all that stuff thrown at them. So it varies across the different churches.
The other thing is, while I have you, because I think the thing that you have is insight across literally thousands of video clips that are produced. Can you share with us what works in video today? The landscape, the algorithms, social content is changing. What's working right now, or what's one or two things that churches should be thinking about in terms of how they use video? Is there any advice you can give?
Yeah, so uh, video is like the number one way to get engagement right now on social media, and in short form. I don't think that's news really to a whole lot of people. But the reason why maybe is something that people still are not aware of is that these like Facebook Reels, Instagram Reels, you posting there, the social media platforms are trying to get this in front of the people that they think will like your content.
Yeah.
And if they follow your page, it doesn't even that doesn't that's not important. And so getting your video, your short form video, your reel, your TikTok, if you decide TikTok, they're trying to get that in front of as many people as possible that they think will like that. And so
Yeah.
I think that churches are underutilizing that still because there are many churches out there with 100 followers or less right now that are getting thousands of views on their video, and that is not how social media has traditionally worked. So that opens churches up to a much bigger audience worldwide, like we started off talking about.
Yeah, and so that I call that the TikTokification of all the algorithms, right? That I believe TikTok is the one that really is the place where you don't need to have a large follower account, a subscriber count, in order for your content to be served up to people that are not following you, and all these other platforms are following suit. Outside of TikTok, because not every church is on TikTok, what is there a specific platform that you are seeing that has the most traction for short form video like this for a church? Like, is it YouTube Shorts? Is it Instagram Reels or Stories? Where are you seeing the most traction?
So it actually really depends. I am seeing it different depending on the church, and I think it kind of depends on who your audience is. I've seen churches that are doing really good on YouTube Shorts. I've seen churches who their biggest account is Facebook, and a lot of times it's Instagram with these reels. But I think it just kind of depends on the content. If your church is more geared towards the population of people that are on Facebook, for example, your clips might do a little bit better there. And I've seen that even on sermon shots at times and across different businesses. It's like that different platform sometimes just does better for whatever reason.
That's
So
interesting. So you
it's
got to
a
test it for your own people, and so
I always say go to all of them. It doesn't take much to post on all of them. Once you have an account, post on all of them and see which one is best for your church.
what about frequency? Are you seeing anything in terms of how many videos people post and that correlation with traction? Like, is one video a week enough? I know Sermon Shots gives you the AI tool within Sermon Shots identifies automatically for you the sweet spots, multiple sweet spots of your sermon, so you can just output video clips very quickly. But are you seeing the recommendation right now that you must post multiple times daily, 7 days a week, or is there at least a threshold where you're like, at least do not do, you must do at least one a day, or is once or twice a week
Yeah.
enough? I think that's the question I get a lot is like, we don't have video ministry. We don't do a lot. I've been posting once a week, twice a week, but I'm not seeing any traction. What do you say to a person that has that experience?
So my personal feeling, and I think the data backs this up too, but it's a little bit of my gut, is actually the algorithm that decides where to put your video and how many people. It doesn't matter. It doesn't actually care how many you've posted before in the past. That is not impactful. I think what the reason why I still think though that you should post a lot isn't because you're helping the algorithm. You're helping you and your church understand actually what works. So
Mm,
if you're only posting once a week, you're only getting one day, you're 50 data points a year. That's not a lot. And so if you're posting every day, you're then getting almost 400 data points a
gotcha.
year, right? So that to me is really what drives that more is you learning what's actually working. Um, and also giving your chance, giving your um, account more what shots on goal, right? The more times you're shooting, the more chances you're going to actually make something.
Yeah.
So, and with these short form videos, with the way these work, you're not like you're not overburdening anyone because it's not like everybody's seeing everything you post anyways, right? So I don't think you can overdo it. I think you can underdo it because you're not learning.
Gotcha. Okay, and let's take that use case where if you start posting and you see one specific sermon topic is a winner, right? Well, it's an outlier. All of a sudden, you're getting thousands more views than these other sermon topics. What's your suggestion then? Do you go back to that original sermon and generate more clips from that sermon, or how would you approach it? Once you get that data that says this topic we always talk about, like I've done 3 sermons this year, or the last 3 years we have these sermons that we've done, same topic. What do you do next? How do you capitalize on that?
So I guess the first thing is that maybe it's not always the topic. I can go through that, but I would say there's multiple things that it could be. And I think whatever that thing is, it depends on how much you want that to impact what your church is doing. So, for example, I know that I've heard real people who will say, like, I had a conversation with a church who they realized that when they posted clips where the pastor had some sort of prop, that those clips actually were doing way better. And they not only thought about doing that more for clips, uh, because that is one thing you can adjust what you're doing in your sermon for your digital ministry, right? Like it doesn't have to overall affect what you're doing in your sermon, but you can think about it through the lens of how people in the digital space will think about it, right? Just in the same way that you're trying to stay on camera, you're staying on the stage, right? You can, in this example, use props more, but I think it also can, maybe this doesn't really apply to what you asked, but you can use that data then to help you with your sermon, right? Like props, people are intrigued and stop and think about that. That's just one example, but it could be multiple things that you learn throughout that.
I love it. And then what is the difference between video content and like Sermon Shots allows you to create, I don't know, 10 other, 12 other types of content other than video. So it's not just taking your video sermon and producing video clips. You can take your video sermon and there's an article and there's summaries and again, 5-day devotional. There's all these things you can do. The study guide, I think, is really great for small group discussions, etc. What is the mix that people are using your tools for right now? Do you have any sense of they're mostly using it for social content, they're mostly using it for offline content? What is the mix of people? How are people repurposing in reality right now?
Yeah, I can definitely tell it depends on the church. I think video is the biggest one. So setting that one aside, that's the one that everyone. But we have churches who absolutely love the images that you can make. So you can make little quote images, of some engaging quote. There's a subset of churches that are loving that and creating all kinds of images from it. Um, but then the discipleship content, like you were referring to, this is actually in some churches, this is for them is saving them like 5-10 hours a week, and they're like, I would do it just for this thing only, which is creating this 5-day devotional, creating the discussion guide. Um, Even if you're not taking it 100% as is, which you probably shouldn't, it's saving you that first initial 90% of your work. And that has been, I've heard many people from churches talking about how that is freeing up them to do all the things they had on the backlog of their their to-do list, because they now don't have to spend Monday morning creating a discussion guide or something
Yeah,
like that. So
absolutely.
um, yeah, so it's a mix. It depends on the church.
So, what's one piece of advice for a pastor or leader that's saying, I want to lean forward into AI. We're not actively using it across the board. All of our team members or all of our staff are not using AI today, but I'd like to get ready and make sure that we have the opportunity to help people become conversant in AI. What's the one piece of advice you would give to pastors who are just starting out, just starting the journey. They haven't been using ChatGPT or anything else consistently at all, or there's a significant portion of the population that have never used any AI tool ever. And so, what's that one piece of advice that you would give to them?
Uh, so first thing I would say is have a talk with your church and your staff and say it's okay to use this. I have I've heard some churches who some of the people that want to use some sort of tool are not sure that they should because they don't feel like their pastor or their church is okay with it. So I would say start with, hey, this is okay. Let's use it and let's come up with ideas. Let's talk about the different ways of using it. But I would say going back to one of the things I said before is go use the one tool that everybody's heard of, ChatGPT. Go in there. What's a problem that you want solved? Start talking to ChatGPT like you would a friend that you're asking for some advice, and ask it to do a task for you. Ask it to write an email for you. Just look and see how great of a job it does. And I think that is what's going to start to trigger churches and pastors to start thinking about more and more ways that they can use it.
I love it. I love it. As we close out today's conversation, I want to end with a lightning round of questions, just something that's a little bit fun for everybody. If you're ready for it, we got 4 questions that we'll go to. So let's start the clock. First, Corey, what is your favorite chatbot of the day right now? Of all the AI chatbots out there, what's your go-to right now?
So right now I am loving everything about Claude. A lot of the content I need to create, Claude has just done a great job of sounding like me when I'm trying to talk in, emails, blog articles, things like that. It's just done a really good job of long form content for me.
Are you training it and seeding it with your voice stuff, or is it just out of the box?
Yeah, Claude Projects is it has been really good. So you teach it how you want it to do things, and it starts to learn. It applies that every time you talk to it then,
Awesome.
and it's really good.
Yeah, Club Projects has been a very good development. Okay, the next one is, what is the latest trial account that you've set up for a new AI service? I know we're all experimenting. There's tons of new AI apps that keep on coming up every day, and we're trying them out. What's the latest one that you've set up as a trial?
Uh, Runway ML has been well, that one has been awesome. When I tested that out, being able to take an image and turn it into a video was is great. I was able to create a whole like 30-second video by creating a few different images, piecing it together, putting it together, and yeah, it's amazing what it can do.
Video is the future. Okay, the next one is, what's one way that you think pastors can use AI that they're missing out on?
Um, I think that one of the areas that we're not talking about enough is how much it can be used for different languages.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, transcribing and convert, it's just a huge thing worldwide. But here in the US, being able to use your church sermon to be able to speak in another language, right? That's a huge thing here, the big Spanish speaking population. Or being able to just put it in different languages across the world. Again, going back to how we talked about very early on, being able to use your piece of content to impact the world. Translation is getting really good with AI. So I think that's going to be a big thing for people.
Yeah, I can just see even like your early experience with your global websites. What if you just translated every single sermon that you've ever preached and just published it and see what happens? What a blessing it would be to people of different languages across the globe. Okay, last question is, we are all talking about this big thing that's coming. It's AGI, artificial general intelligence, and the singularity. It's the moment where machines are smarter than humans, and the intelligence is just going to eclipse us. And there's so many different predictors of when that milestone is going to happen in human history. What year do you actually think it's going to happen, right? So just the context for everybody, the AI nerds and scientists out there have predicted everything from 25 years from now, 7 years from now, 15 years from now, 2 years from now. AI, entrepreneur Sam Altman, who's the founder of OpenAI and ChatGPT, has said that we're going to see AGI in the next year or two. Corey, what year do you think AGI is going to hit?
I am going to lean towards the longer side. I think what AGI is maybe depends on a different definitions, I guess. But I'm gonna say 2035. I think it's
2035.
much longer. I'm gonna lean towards the longer end.
Okay, so we got
And
some time.
yeah.
We'll just have to determine, is it going to be on a Tuesday or on a Thursday when it hits, right? So that's great. The last question is, hey, where can people follow you? You obviously have tons of experience that just is outside of just this one little narrow thing that Sermon Shots does in terms of taking your sermon, long form content, and repurposing it for other discipleship purposes. Where can people learn more about Sermon Shots, about you? How do they connect with you? Just give someone the opportunity to figure out how to connect with you further.
Yeah, you can find Sermon Shots on any of the platforms, Sermon Shots, sermonshots.com or any of the social media. Me personally, I'm the only Corey Alderin in the world, so you can just search me on any of the platforms and you'll find me really quickly.
Yeah, and I would say Corey's very accessible and very thoughtful in all the things that we're doing in the space. Thank you so much, Corey, for joining us today. And everybody here, thank you for listening in on our conversations. We love to bring other entrepreneurs, other ministry innovators right here to the table so we can have these conversations. But it is all inspired by you. So please reach out to me and let me know what topics you are interested in exploring further as we go deeper down into how we can use AI for good. And we'll see you here next time on the next video.